Okay, it's 6 o'clock. We can call the meeting to order. So we do have some opening remarks to start our meeting with. So first off, we'd like to welcome you to the hybrid and in-person and virtual meeting for the Committee of Adjustments for the Township of Central Frontenac. Just so everyone is aware, members of the public may join in person or virtually if they wish. For those of you who may be new to the Committee of Adjustments, my name is Philip Smith and I'm the chair of the committee. We also have with us tonight Nikki Gowdy, Danny Meeks, Bill Everett, Duncan McGregor, Susan Irwin, and Lynn Clagus. Chris Nielsen is our community services coordinator, and he'll be assisting us with the meeting as the meeting host tonight. We are also joined by planning staff with the county. The format of the meeting will follow the agenda posted online. Staff have also prepared a presentation for everyone to follow along with during this meeting. This will be shown on the screens. For each application, with a public hearing, we will follow this format. As the chair, I will introduce the file so that everyone knows where we are on the agenda. The planner will then provide an overview of the application. We will then ask if there's any comments from the applicant or their agent. Committee members may then ask staff and the applicant or their agent. Committee members may then ask staff and the applicant or their agent questions, if any. The public will then have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. I encourage that you ask any questions you may have. The committee will then deliberate and vote on the application. Voting will take place with members of the committee raising their hands or verbally confirmation if attending online. I will then state whether the vote was carried. All members of the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the new applications. If a person or public body does not make oral submission at the meeting or make written submission to the Township of Central Frontenac before a decision is made, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. Please note that as of January 1st, 2023, only persons specified in the Act are permitted to appeal consent and minor area applications. The Township staff will be in touch following the meeting and will be forwarding a copy of the decision within 15 days to the applicant and anyone who has requested to be notified. Should you have any questions after the meeting, we encourage you to reach out to staff. The applicant, the minister, or any prescribed public body who has an interest in the matter may, within 20 days of making the decision or date of notice of appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal against the decision of the committee by filing with the Secretary Treasurer of the committee a notice of appeal. I will now ask Chris to provide an overview of how members attending virtually can participate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once the meeting is open to the public, the chair will ask if anyone has any questions or comments. Members of the public attending virtually will be asked to use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. This alerts us that you would like to speak. Staff will then notify the chair that someone would like to speak and then proceed to unmute your microphone. You will receive a notification that your microphone has been unmuted. Please wait a second after unmuting your microphone before speaking. If you're calling in by phone, please dial *9 when you would like to raise your hand during the meeting. You will hear a prompt on the phone that you have raised your hand, and you will be notified when your microphone has been unmuted. This afternoon, it looks like we have 0 members of the public participating with us online and 6 in person.
Thank you, Chris. In the unlikely account that we have a connection issue and the meeting cannot be restored within 15 minutes, the meeting will be postponed and staff will be in touch with each applicant. A notice will also be posted on the Township social media letting you know. So that was a lot of fun for nobody online. This evening, do we have we'll first do the approval of the agenda. Is everybody in agreement with the agenda? Is there any additions or changes? No? Everybody in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of community interest and general nature thereof?
Yes, I have a conflict of interest with agenda item 6. Sorry.
I'm sorry, we can hardly hear anything here.
That was my fault.
No,
Okay, but so that you can hear me, I have a potential conflict of interest with item 6B on our agenda, which is number B-39-23-Olden, the Ducharme Coda application for a consent as I own an abutting property. So I will recuse myself from the deliberations of the tribunal when we come to that.
Thank you. We have no movers or seconders on any of these. Okay, so we're gonna go back, moved by Susan Irwin. And seconded by Lynn. That the agenda be adopted as presented. And we voted all in favor. We'll carry that. Okay. And we have a motion or resolution for approval of the minutes. So go with Nikki. And Bill. So moved by Nikki Gowdy and seconded by Bill Everett that the minutes of the October 12th, 2023 meeting be adopted as, is there any amendments? No. As presented, all in favor? Carried. Do we have any deferred items? No. All right, so we're moving on to our first application for consent. Application B 2723 OSO for numbered corporation 2155674 Ontario Inc. At this time, Jenny, do you want to talk about the application?
1 second, I will. I just got kicked out of Zoom for unknown reasons.
Not talk as quickly and maybe talk out a little bit because we're getting things that just a mumble. The speakers pointed it out.
So 1 second, I was connected to the internet and then my computer kicked me out. So I'm just trying to reconnect so I can do the proper slideshow for everybody. All right, I can do
There you go,
that.
Jenny,
Yes,
you're on for the rest of the.
I know. That's why I need to reconnect. Good thing. All right, I am now reconnected and hopefully this will stay. Okay, yes. So I'll talk into it and try and talk slowly and clearly. Okay. This application is for the creation of a parcel, one new parcel from an existing large parcel. The proposed lot will have 365 meters of frontage on Clarendon Road and will have an area of approximately 40 acres. The retained parcel will have about 48 meters or 157 feet of frontage on Clarendon Road and will have an area of approximately 210 acres. They're both parcels currently zoned and designated rural, and the intent is to leave them as that going forward. There were wetlands, watercourse, and water bodies identified on the subject property. Here on the next slide, you can see the proposed new lot is shown in the hatched yellow. It is in the upper eastern corner of the subject property, which is shown outlined in red. This application was not circulated for septic approval as the proposed lot has existing services. And at 210 acres, it was the opinion of the septic authority that there would probably be somewhere that you could put a septic system on that retained parcel. So there was no formal review completed. It was also circulated for review to Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority, who had no objections to the application as submitted. They did conduct a site visit and noted there was a number of wetlands, watercourse, and water body on the subject property, both on the retained and severed. They did note that permits would be required from the Conservation Authority for any shoreline works, wetland interference, construction on organic soils. There's no new development proposed for the new lot and no development proposed for the retained parcel at this time. At the writing of the report, the public comments hadn't quite come in when we were going through the report process. However, between that point and this meeting, we did receive a letter with several questions. I'm going to kind of summarize the questions rather than reading the entire letter out. And then if there's questions regarding that, the entire letter was provided as part of the package and available as part of the agenda if any of the committee would like to follow along. So the questions included who owns the Ontario Numbered Company and what does that company do? I do not know who owns it. The only information that could be provided is if the people who would like to know go into the township office and talk to the tax department, and whatever information is in the tax roll books can be provided. We can't give out information such as that just like verbally. It has to come through the tax roll books, and that's for privacy concerns. Next question was why they're requesting a severance and if future severances will be requested. I'm not sure on the reason why they're requesting it. I'm really looking at the planning rationale and whether the proposal meets the required policies of the township as well as the Planning Act and provincial policy statement. The next question was what was the intention of the company to do with the severed parcel and what remains of the current parcel, and if any other severances were proposed. Again, I'm not sure what the future plans are. Should further applications be submitted, we would review them at that time. There was no further plans indicated during any of the pre-consultation process. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't put in future applications, as this parcel has not had any other severances other than that proposed tonight since 2008, which is the severance number where we look at a maximum of 2 severances. So potentially they could apply for one. From a planning point, that may be challenging due to the location of Clarendon Road and the limited frontage for the retained. However, any application that's submitted would be approved or not approved, would be reviewed based on what was submitted at that time. There was also a question as to why the western boundary splits what has been currently used as farmland. Again, I'm not sure what the rationale was. This was what was applied for, and we review the application based on what was applied for, not necessarily why people do what they do. People do things with their properties for various reasons, whatever works best for them. And the last one was with regards to whether this severance would impact biological sustainability of adjacent properties. No severance or work on a property should negatively impact any neighboring properties. That's a general rule of good neighbors. Also, there's riparian law that looks at water runoff and other such things. Again, this was reviewed by the Conservation Authority, and they do look at the interconnections of natural features and natural hazards, and they did not raise any concerns with regards to what has been proposed today. So the recommendation from planning staff is that the committee hear any comments from the public if today, and subject to what is raised, if they feel it is satisfactorily addressed, then approve the application subject to the conditions in the planning report, which includes standard conditions such as a survey of the new lot parcel, a road widening along Clarendon Road, parkland dedication fee, any outstanding taxes on the subject property be paid up, and the certificate of official be signed within a 2-year time period.
Thank you, Jenny. Is the applicant with us tonight? Nobody online, so I'm assuming,
I see no one online.
okay. Does anybody from the committee have any questions? Anybody from the public wishing to speak tonight?
Can I make a presentation?
Yeah, you have to come up and state your name for the record. Yeah, just right up here.
My name is Robert Brian McLean. I'm the person who wrote the letter that you just read. I want to first of all state that what I am going to say in the meeting is presented with no intention of malice in any way. We need to understand that it's just that I'm here representing the concerns of a group of neighbors in the area. Just to sort of give you a background of who I am. My wife, Marguerite LaFerriere McLean, and I own 728 acres, some of which touches the proposed severance area. I did receive a letter indicating that I could appear before the meeting if I so chose. I should also, on this land, my wife and I have been can you hear me okay? Have been accumulating acreage in the area, and we have put together 5 pieces of land. We are very concerned about the environment, and we treat our land as an environmentally sensitive area. We are doing a number of things to help preserve what's left of the environment. For instance, on our land, we encourage the growth of milkweed because we are working with McGill and Queen's universities to try and foster what's the name of the butterflies? Monarchs. Sorry, it just slipped my mind. Monarch butterflies. We are working on trying to reintroduce butternut trees. We're working with the gene reproduction group in Ontario. We are working with the Ontario Woodlot Association, attempting to control invasive species. In fact, I'm the chair of the communications committee of the Ontario Woodlot Association. The 4 times a year, the Ontario Woodlander that comes out is more or less my responsibility. And this is an association dedicated to private woodlot owners. And we are very concerned about producing sustainable forests and doing our best to ensure that the environment is protected. I should also state that upon the death of my wife and myself, these properties are being donated to the Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust at no cost, so they will be protected forever. We have done well in Canada, and we're trying to give back as best we can. I should also indicate that my comments tonight will reflect other people who live in the area. We have been discussing this over the week and a half after we received the initial letter of severance. We only received yesterday at 2:30 the detailed outline of the severance proposal, and I was going to hook up tonight on my computer, but I didn't seem to be able to hook in. but maybe we can get by without that. It might take us 10 minutes to get hooked up, and we don't want to waste any time. So there was a huge flurry of phone call activity last night to evaluate the severance proposal made by Mr. Bertrand. So my comments tonight will also reflect the feelings of people in the area. These include the following, and by the way, this is I was hoping we would be closer together to you, but this is a map of the lands we have put together. They all touch each other, so that when the Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust takes over, they can run trails through them and various things like that. The property in question here, let me just get this right, turned right up here. We own 265 acres here, 52 here, 300 here. This is Willis Armstrong Road, and 100 here. And the requested severance is located right here, so it touches our property. I also represent the thoughts of Stacy and Isabel Churchill. Stacy is a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. The Churchills own this piece of land here, but water from the proposed severance drains onto their land as well as mine through Mary's Creek and onto the Bolton Creek. Also, I'm representing the ideas of Art and Donna Teal. Art owns and Donna own more than 800 acres on the south shore of the Bolton Creek. Also, John and I presume Peggy Campbell, who are present tonight at the meeting. Also, Lorna Sargent, Gordon Patterson, Graham Patterson, Jim Patterson, Ken Ashurst, and Albert Shelley. And while my comments might not reflect exactly what they are saying, they're largely pretty close. So my first question is this, my first point is, has the committee already agreed to sever the property? The answer is no. The reason I ask that is because the property has been for sale for over 2 months now, the proposed severed property. And I'm wondering how they can put a property up for sale that hasn't yet been legally severed. The signs are on the road. It makes a sham out of this committee, and I think that should be a concern that you have. My second point is that the application information that we received yesterday about 2:30, there are some things that were not clear about in the application itself. For instance, we note that the application was not signed by the applicant, dated by the applicant, or stamped by Central Frontenac, where it is required on pages 13 and 15. So in fact, has the applicant actually signed the application at some point?
I can speak to that. Yes, the application's been signed and stamped. When we create the agenda, we actually redact the signatures of the applicants just for privacy.
I see, and that's why it didn't appear on the document we
that's correct.
received.
Yes.
Thank you.
In our package, your signature is removed from the letter as well. Just so you're aware.
Okay, that makes sense. We weren't sure of what that was. We wanted to make sure that it was a legal document. Having taught law, one of the first things I told my prospective students was always make sure things are signed and dated. Secondly, I was hoping to put this up on the screen for you, but on page 9, it stated that the existing use of the land is vacant. In fact, it isn't. It's farmland, and it was farmed as recently as last summer. The proposed use is residential, and yet the use of the land is more logically as a farm because there are existing farm buildings on it, a large barn, outbuildings, tractor sheds, places like that. On page 10, it says regarding the access to the proposed severance, the applicant says that there is no entrance to the proposed severance, but in fact, there is already a road there. Does the applicant plan to put a second entrance to the road?
Do you want to carry on with your questions and?
Yeah, I
we'll
just
take
want to
notes
make
and
sure
try
that
to-
we're all on the same page on this and that we're not misinterpreting anything. Page 11, concerning the well, it states that there is a well a water well on the severed property, which makes sense because there's a farmhouse there, but also on the retained property. Where is the well on the retained property? I've been on the property. I don't recall a well there. Likewise, in terms of the sewage system, it says that on the severed lot, there is a sewage disposal system, which in fact is true. There is a farmhouse there, but there is also a retained sewage. There is a sewage system on the retained lot. As far as I know, the retained lot is just Canadian Shield Forest. So is that an inconsistency in the application? Or is the applicant planning to build something else in there?
So Jenny's ready to answer that question if you would like.
Yes, those questions are related to what the likely services would be. For all severances retained and severed in Central Frontenac, it will be private well and private septic because there are no municipal services. The intent of those questions, and they come directly from what's required to be on there for the Planning Act, is that would there be services? So perhaps in some townships, you can say that this one has a septic and a well, but the retained has access to municipal services. So this is more, it's not that there are those on the property, but should it be serviced, that's what the servicing would be comprised of, if that makes sense. That just that there
Yeah.
aren't any municipal services. So that's going to be private well and private septic on every single consent application. The application forms are standard and certain parts of them are required to be on there, even though they're more really applicable to urban environments. And that question is really to determine whether or not there's a private septic well, what type of services would be available for the property rather than what's existing necessarily on there at this point.
Okay.
It does say in the application, right, existing or proposed. So that's one of the headings where they're checking off.
Proposed. Okay.
Yeah.
And then on page 11 on 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.7, 5.8, it's unclear what the X means there. When we examined that page, we're not sure whether the X refers to a yes or a no in all those cases, if you look at it.
I had the same question when I was going through the application. And I assumed that the X meant a no, because if you look at 5.9, the X, when it's a yes, is on the left-hand side of the yes, as opposed to elsewhere, it's on the right-hand side when it means a no.
Well, we've had 4 people look at it and they can't decipher what it means. So
Clarity is important.
yes, it is, especially on land boundaries. So can someone tell me what the applicant is saying on 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.7, 5.8?
Yeah, I can go through that.
Question.
That section is regarding the history of the property. So has the subject land already been subject of an application for approval plan of subdivision? The X is saying no, it has not. So that's 5-1. 5-2, has it any land been severed from the parcel originally acquired by the current owner? The X is saying no, that has not. And that's important when looking at numbers of severances.
Yeah.
5-3, has any land been severed from the parcel by the prior owners? The X is saying no, there has not been any severances.
So what you're saying is the X is a no all the way through.
That is, yes.
Okay, that's great.
Because the X
All right,
has
now
been, has replaced, there would have been a little box there and the X has replaced that box in all of those. When I read through that,
Okay,
all of
because
those have been
that
no's.
little box didn't get replaced previously in other sections, so.
We have some challenges with our PDF fillable forms, and this is
Yeah.
one of them. Sometimes it doesn't highlight them quite correctly.
Okay.
So I did confirm those answers with the applicant.
Okay, thank you for that. On page 10, names of applicant or people who have properties within the area that warrants notification. I noticed that neither my name, Robert Brian McLean, nor my wife's name, Marguerite LaFerrier McLean, we own all our properties jointly, is listed there. Should it not be listed?
Again, so one of the challenges with this application is this standard form. Historically, those names would have been required to be listed. At this point, what we do is use our GIS system and I run a buffer and it auto generates all of the property owner's information and address information. So that section is almost never filled out anymore because a lot of people also don't know their neighbors and we have access to the information in a much more succinct way than in trying to contact all the neighbors and get their information.
Okay. It's just that this is a legal document and pretty binding. And, you know, these things.
So we do
Anyways, let's
have
go
on
on
file,
to-
we do have on file who all would have been given notice.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, we did receive notice through a letter, and we do appreciate that. Thank you. On page 21, where is the species at risk review by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks? We did not see that in the application.
Yes, so this application was circulated to the Conservation Authority. And had that been determined to be a required information, it would have been provided. I don't have the knowledge to do that review, so we rely on the Conservation Authority to assist us in review and determine if species at risk or further detailed analysis would be required. As this is a 40-acre lot with no new development proposed compared to what was there, it wasn't determined that that was a required information for this application.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, and I apologize for going through this, but I just wanted to clarify things since I have to report back to other people. And now I'd like to get to the main gist of why I'm here. The property in question, which was known as the Sargent Farm previously, Earl and Patricia Sargent. Earl was born in the farmhouse on the property. He drove the snowplow for many years for the township and so on, until recently was a working farm, and in fact still has all the components necessary for a working farm, a large, very large barn, a number of outbuildings, tractor sheds, and perhaps 80 acres in the form of hay fields and grain fields. There is a concern that the grain fields are being split in the application. I don't know, can you put up the map previously that you had up of the app? I was gonna try and do it off my computer, my Mac, but as I said, it'd take us probably half an hour to get hooked up together. Can I go up and point something out to the committee here? Yeah. Okay, so This is our property, one of ours right here. It's 100 acres. We own 300 on the other side. We own 52 right here and then 265 over there. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was a
We
teacher.
can, I'm not sure if they can.
Oh, can you hear? Yeah, okay. You will know that the area here, I'm colorblind, so I can't give you a color. I'm one of those 8% of white males who are colorblind, and the recessive gene, by the way, comes from the female line. Okay, so it's virtually impossible to have a colorblind female, but apart from that, you can see that the grain hay fields were in this area right here, this color right here. Part of them are shown as being within the proposed severance. But this huge area here, which constitutes perhaps 30 or 40 acres, is not. And the concern of myself, my wife, John and Peggy here, and the people who I mentioned that I've been in contact with, is that it's a rural area, it's a farming area. We're going to need the farmland someday. We're allowing huge numbers of immigrants in. Farmland is disappearing. And what we're suggesting here is that the current severance is unacceptable because it divides the farmland. And what we would like to see is that the severance include another 60 or 80 acres here of this farmland, which is not shown in the farm on the severance. This is the road into the house here, by the way. Or to move the eastern boundary of the proposed severance over, this is wetlands here, by the way, over to about there. Can you see that? And then to have the 40 or 60 acres taken here and move the western boundary of the severance here. That way, the farm could continue to exist. They already have the farm on the market. They've been advertising it left, right, and center for 2 months now. And as I said, it sort of pokes fun at this committee because they've assumed they're going to get the severance automatically, which is very, very wrong. And whoever buys this land will be able to conduct a farm because they have the barn here, the outbuildings, the tractor shed here, and they will have sufficient agricultural arable land to cut hay, to grow grain, to run cattle, or to run dairy cattle. And so that, in essence, is why I'm here tonight, and that's what the people who I represent would like to see. We're not opposed to the severance. We just think the severance is in the wrong area. We have a feeling, an understanding of why. And again, I'm just guessing here on this. I don't want to be legally bound by this.
Can I suggest we hurry this along just because we understand what you're trying to make a point of. But I think we also need to express that the applicant has the right to ask that their land be divided in a certain way. And so long as they're meeting the requirements of the official plan and the planning rules, this committee doesn't have much authority to say you can't do that. Oh.
I'm gonna say, if you'd like, I actually have answers to all of those questions. The reason we could not shift sorry, I'm gonna try and do east and west. I'm really bad at that. The eastern boundary is because then we would be bisecting the wetlands, which kind of really goes against the natural heritage policies that have been established by the Conservation Authority. Wherever possible, severance lines do not bisect water bodies, wetlands, and other natural heritage features. The intent is to keep those where possible. I understand that in this case, this wetland has already been bisected. That was a historic thing and I can't change that. But going forward, the general policy is that we wouldn't bisect natural heritage features whenever possible. With regards to the farmland, that owes to where Clarendon Road actually touches this property. There is a minimum amount of road frontage of 46 meters that is required for any parcel if we're going to create a new lot, either severed or retained. And in order for the retained parcel to meet that minimum road frontage, this is where that lot line had to be drawn. This allows the existing entrance for the 40-acre parcel in the farmland to continue to be used for the parcel being severed, while maintaining the required road frontage for the retained parcel, and therefore allowing it to have direct access to a township maintained road. So while it doesn't necessarily make sense from just the farm field part, there's other policies that we had to look at. And if that lot line was shifted over to encompass the entirety of the farmland, the retained parcel would have no road frontage and no legal access. And I would not have been able to recommend approval of the application if it were submitted in that way, because we would be creating a landlocked parcel, and that is against the policies of both the township and county official plan and zoning bylaw.
Okay, this is wetlands here. It's already bisected. So what we're proposing is from here over to here and down to, well, to the spot right here. In terms of bisecting the wetlands, you would not be bisecting the wetlands, so you're erroneous on that. In terms of the entrance here, they wouldn't be able to enter in this part anyways because it's wetlands, it's swamp, and no one's going to these days accept it. I mean, we have on our property with Ducks Unlimited, and they, you know, they monitor our property all the time to make sure we're living up to our dedications. From your arguments, and I understand your point of view, the proper thing to do, the logical thing to do, the right thing to do right here is to shift the boundary over this way and to save the agricultural land. Now, you mentioned that there's not much you can do, but maybe there is. And let me just leave what I'm saying with that, because it seems to me that the local taxpayers and those who live there should have a right to have a say in this. We're going to need farmland. You know, if things go bad, we're going to need farmland. And the way it is now, a person is being advertised as farm in the ads. You cannot create enough income by using this field right here if you farm, but if you include the old farm, the old fields, you can make a real go of it, farming. And so I guess I'll end my presentation here. Again, we're concerned that it was advertised before the decision was made. And I think you folks should be very concerned about that because it negates.
That's not an uncommon thing when lots are being.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
That's not an uncommon situation, that realtors will list properties and it'll become conditional upon the severance being approved before a sale will take place.
But what's the word? I don't want to use the word it reeks of, but it seems like your committee is just a rubber stamp committee. And you know, I presented some real human elements here, and I think you need to debate them before you make your decision.
Go ahead, Susan.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. McLean.
Okay.
First of all, Mr. McLean, I'd like to thank you for raising those concerns.
Yes.
And I certainly take them very seriously, and I'm sure the council does. One of the challenges that we have, and you're probably familiar with this, is that the province has dictated what factors we can take into account when considering an application for severance. with respect to the conservation authorities and your concern at species at risk, the authority of the conservation authorities has been severely limited as to what they can address and what we can consider. In deciding whether or not we can grant a severance, we have to take, and I'll ask Jenny to speak to anything that I miss, because I'm a new counselor, so I may not get everything correct here. But we have to follow the direction of the provincial policy statement. And they are very much encouraging building. And
Yes.
okay.
Of course, yeah.
And we have to follow the official plan for the county and the town and our own official plan and the township's zoning bylaw. So what we're looking at is, you know, does the Conservation Authority have any reservations? In this case, I believe they were not objecting. And I'll just finish and certainly Mr. Smith will ask for further comments. And in terms of, you know, the lot frontage and so forth, it meets all of our criteria. And, you know, I share your concerns. I've been down this road with people wanting to sever lots where I am as well. And it's a frustrating process. I'm not sure that you quite understood the concern about the frontage on the road for the retained parcel. So when I was looking at the map and where the hayfield is, that's where the road frontage is for the retained parcel, not for the severed parcel. And if the boundary was shifted, the retained parcel would not have access onto Clarendon Road. And that's the problem, I believe.
But there's already the road there into the property within the proposed severance. And it would,
In the severed
it
parcel,
would still be there.
but it's the retained parcel, the part that the corporation is not selling, that would no longer front on Clarendon Road, if I'm looking at
That's not true. They have another half mile of property on Clarendon Road.
that allows them to access that lot.
Well, yes, they could do it, for example. Can we put up? Since we're into legal technicalities here, then this is going to sound a bit stupid, but the fact is that they have all this.
But it doesn't front on a road.
They could run it in here, and over here to the property.
But it doesn't
I know
front on the
it's true,
road.
But you can't say they wouldn't have access. They would.
Jenny, go ahead, please.
See where Clarendon Road leaves the property line?
Yeah.
Well, they need frontage in this area here because they have no legal access. So whatever the, say perhaps there
Yeah.
is, so they still need frontage along here, which is why they can't move the boundary.
Why couldn't they come in right there if we move the boundary?
Because
You have to have-
there's a legal limit on frontage.
Okay. I think you're with me on this, but there's no way around it, that we're screwed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Said that.
Yeah. Can I just take a second here?
Does the committee have any other questions or concern? Nikki, sorry, Nikki had her hand up.
So Jenny, if you blow up the picture on the map and where you're saying the water boundary, you don't want to dissect it in that top right-hand corner, could you move it over enough that you're not dissecting it because it looks like solid land between the next water? Could you move the line over to the left of that and shift the line over, and then they'd still have frontage on Clarendon on the other corner of the property?
Um, I suppose technically, but while that would provide frontage, if you could not use that frontage to construct a driveway and gain access, it has the same effect as if we took the frontage away. If you shift that over, we're bisecting a wetland and providing frontage that is not usable for access to the property.
Any further question? Oh, sorry, Duncan, you had a question.
So, Mr. and Ms. Smithane, thank you very much for your protection of the environment in that area. It's definitely, you're doing some good things. We've been talking a lot about moving this property, but Jay, as far as I know, we can't tell the applicant where they should do their severance. Is that right?
I mean, we can have discussions and encourage certain things, but we ultimately, what is applied for is up to the applicant and we have to review what's applied for. When you look on Frontenac maps, unfortunately, the property that abuts this one to the north, the lot lines extend really far down in, and even this one would give only just the minimum frontage based on where those lot lines are, because the property that's abutting it to the north, where Clarendon Road goes up, has a very long lot line that actually divides the road from this property quite further than you would think. In fact, the lot line on that property abutting to the north encompasses more than half of that farm field. So more than half of that farm field actually isn't even fronting on Clarendon Road within the boundaries of this subject property.
And then my second question was, do we have a standard for the lot size that we require a full septic inspection versus just a verbal confirmation?
There isn't a formal one. That was discussions being had as with the septic being transferred. The general understanding with Township of South Frontenac when they were doing it was in excess of between 10 to 15 acres. Most likely you could find a septic system, with the retained being 210 acres, especially with portion of it being a farm field. The likelihood is high, so they opted not to do a formal review.
One more chance. Do you have any other questions or comments?
I guess not at this time. I do appreciate you listening to me. As I said, this was done without thought of malice. It was done for looking ahead into the future, when we're going to have 40, 50, 60 million people in Canada, and how are we going to feed them? It was done with the fact that it's difficult if you want to start to become a farmer these days with the acquisition of land, with equipment, and yet this offers an opportunity for a young farming couple to start if they could have the full fields. You're not going to be able to do it with the half fields the way it is.
Mr. McLean, maybe this helps maybe a little bit more explain why the road frontage is such an issue on this, because there's a long, narrow, slender piece that's not their
Yeah.
property that runs along the road.
Yeah, that's the nature of Canadian Shield farms, but they are very productive fields. I know I've carried hay bales there.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I was gonna say, I put that map up with the property to the north, so you can see that blue outline is not owned by this property. So that is how much of that road frontage is actually not even part of this parcel. And the only part that's left is between the end of that blue line and their driveway. So I would say at least half of that farm field doesn't even touch Clarendon Road based on the lot frontages. And that's why they ended up with the lot line where they were. Initially, they were looking at having it further over and having it included. And I let them know based on the mapping that they didn't actually even own that part. So they can't have it as part of the frontage of the property because they don't own it there.
wow, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can only say I hope you folks can do the right thing somehow on this and look 40 years down the road with your grandchildren and whatever. But again, I do appreciate the opportunity. And again, obviously, my wife Margot and I and the Campbells here are very interested in this. I will report this back to the people who I'm more or less in a way representing and so on.
Thank you. Bill, you had a,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to point out one thing. This application is for the purchase only. You'll have another opportunity when it comes time to do something on the land.
Could you explain that a bit further, please? What, like,
All they can do right now is purchase the land.
okay,
They can't do the buildings or anything else.
so they can't declare it a farm, it's residential land?
They can use it as the farm, but they can't do any building and stuff like that until they do another application. So you do have another chance to say something.
Thank you.
so just one other comment, just to help clarify. Although it might be zoned rural, farming and agricultural use is part of rural in our zoning bylaw. So,
Yeah. Listen,
Sorry.
I appreciate the jam you're in on this, you know, you have to follow the rules, but the rules in this case seem very, very wrong.
Susan?
Thank you. Once again, I commend you and your wife and the other couple who are here for the environmental protection and the concerns that you have raised. Unfortunately, as you know, as a law professor, there's a difference between justice and law. And although the council may appreciate what is right, we are governed by the rules and the laws that we have to follow.
I understand. Perhaps there's a loophole that will suddenly appear, or somebody will have an epiphany and say, wow, we can do this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jenny?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify something that Bill said. That's all right. Going forward, like you said, this is approval for the severance. Should they want to do further severances of either parcel, that would come back to the committee. With regards to buildings and structures on the property, that's a building permit process only. That wouldn't come before the committee. There's no public notification process for that. If they were to do something larger or more significant, like a plan of subdivision or condominium or a change of zoning to industrial or something besides the rural and the current permitted uses, then there may be an opportunity, depending on what the proposal was, to comment as a rezoning would go before council for a decision. Plans of subdivision and condominium are approved through county council. There's other different things. So if it's just buildings and structures, that isn't something that the neighbors are notified. But if any other further severances or land uses or things are proposed that are outside the current permitted uses, there are processes for review on that. I just wanted to clarify if it was just buildings, not, but other things, yes.
Yeah, you just need to come forward and state your name for the record.
I'm Peggy Muldoon. I don't have any land down there, but just an interested party. As a group, they must ask for opinions sooner or later on whether or not their policies are working and any recommendations that you could put forward. Because you had a severance there at one time that went through marshlands. So we're assuming that at one time, severing marshlands was not an issue. And now we've come up with something where severing farmland is not an issue. So maybe as a group, that could be a part of what your venue you could do, is going forward, make a recommendation that perhaps usage of all lands, farmland, marshlands, whatever, should all be considered. So that these things don't, in the future keep on happening. And then, 20 years down the road said, oops, that farmland got severed. We now no longer do that. Just a point. Thank you.
With regards to that, and possibly for the interest of the committee also, while there are limited lands within the Township of Central Frontenac that are designated as prime ag lands or prime agricultural lands, that type of review is done based at a provincial level based on the soil quality and types. So there's a soil inventory. I'm not exactly sure where to find off the top of my head, but there has been a review done. So more in the southern parts of Frontenac County, so South Frontenac Township and Wolf Island, which are also townships we do planning for. There are lands that are zoned agricultural, and those are designated as agricultural for that exact reason. And that's based on, I believe it's, I'm going to speak ahead if I guess, usually class 1, 2 soils. And it's sort of there's a variation of classification of types of soil and agricultural potential that's done. And those that meet a certain threshold limit are provincially directed to be protected for farming for the future. And then there are limits on size and numbers of severances. That's something the provincial government's working on getting around. And there was much backlash for exactly the reasons that you guys have concerns, and I'm hoping we'll backtrack again. The provincial government does things and we then have to follow their policies. So these weren't designated as prime agricultural lands that are protected under the current policies. I'm not saying they won't at some point, but there are lands that are done exactly for that very reason. These just didn't meet that classification based on their soil types and densities.
It's off as well. There you go.
My name's John Campbell. I'm one of the former owners of a property owned by Brian. I was wondering, when I was trying to get your attention, was the Conservation Authority reviewed in person or by checking out aerial maps? I'm wondering if they were aware of some work being done that I've heard about, I haven't seen for myself, draining some areas and digging a pool pond area.
Jenny, can you comment?
Yeah, I was just reviewing their comments. So for this application, it says that according to review of aerial imagery and GIS mapping, that the following exist. I am aware that there are a couple of proposed severances coming up at a next meeting on the property next to it. So I do know that the Conservation Authority has been out in this area. According to their comments, they didn't do a site visit specific.
My hearing's
Oh,
very good.
say, according to the conservation for this specific severance, they did their review based on aerial imagery and GIS mapping. I do know that on a neighboring property abutting to the east, sorry, again, I'm really bad with east and west. The one at the corner of Clarendon and Willis Armstrong, the next one over. There's severances being proposed for that, and they did do site visits for those. When they have concerns or they're unsure of their mapping, they will go out and do site visits. It does say in their comments, though, that for this specific application, they did not do a site visit. I'm gonna say if there's
Not used to CB radio or whatever. I'm not, if they haven't attended the property, then, and as I say, it's hearsay that there's some work being done. And if they're not aware of it, then their report is not accurate. I found the whole process totally lacking. I mean, some of these forms that you have an X here, it says this legally. If it says it's got an entrance there or a well there, there should be a well there. If it's not there, then it's not there.
yes, and those forms do say existing or proposed entrance well, septic servicing. Those are
That's what you're saying, that it will be, maybe, but on a legal form that says there is one.
well, the form says, is there an existing or proposed, what are the existing or proposed servicing? So existing on one would be
Or proposed.
or proposed. Because all services would have to be private well, there are no municipals. If you have concerns with regards to development that the Conservation Authority may have an interest in, I welcome you to reach out to Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority and let them know. If there's concerns raised, they will follow up and do site visits through their own enforcement process, but that would be outside the township.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Duncan?
So then asking that, what is the norm for the conservation authorities? Is this, they normally not come out and look at the properties, or is?
I don't know what their norm is. I just know what they do based on what they provide the information. As I said, when it comes back, I would say more often than not, they do go out and do site visits. Generally, if they're not doing them, they would have some reason for, maybe they have better mapping. They do have access to different mapping than we do that's more detailed and has different information. We frequently will be provided with wetland mapping and other information from them once we consult with them that we do not have access to. So just because it's not something that we can see through our mapping doesn't mean that they don't have that information. They noted in their comments, they have mapping showing the location of organic soils. So associated with wetlands in the northwest corner of the retained parcels, they're talking about regulated and unregulated wetlands in the different sections of the severed and retained parcels. They had actually quite a detailed list of what was there and what wasn't, what was regulated and what wasn't, and different things as to where they went. Specifically talking about north and southwest corners of properties where they connect to water bodies on the adjacent lands where that flows through to. So there's more details on exactly what's there in their comments, but this one actually had a lot of details on the natural features on the property, more than some that are provided when they have done a site visit.
Any further questions? Susan?
So given the concerns raised about the process in terms of the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority not having done a site visit, is that something that we could defer a decision until a site visit was done?
The committee is able to make whatever decision they so feel is appropriate. If you feel that a deferral and request of the Conservation Authority to do a site visit is appropriate, that is your decision. It may result in additional costs for the applicant. There is a review fee. I don't know if an additional fee would be charged. Again, I understand money's not everything, but that is something. And if the committee would like to do a deferral, that is entirely up to you.
Is that your pleasure, Susan?
Well, I think it's the only loophole that I'm aware of that we could take advantage of in this situation.
So I think you need a seconder.
Just a, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Just a question of that. Could we not just add it as a condition of approval? And then that way it would streamline this and wouldn't have to come back if the Conservation Authority was okay with that?
Again, you can add or remove any conditions other than those recommended in the planning report. I do only make recommendations, not decisions. That is the committee.
So at this point, we have.
Yeah, I can say
a
my concern
mover
would be
and a
that,
seconder to defer.
yeah.
So
So my concern with adding conditions would be that something was raised or changed, or the dilemma could be is if the Conservation Authority won't go out and do it. We can't control them either. They could say their review has been completed satisfactorily. I don't know. So there's some challenges with us dictating what the outside commenting agencies do and don't do with regards to their review.
So again, we have a mover and a seconder to defer. So, and we're deferring to have the Conservation Authority go back out and re-examine the site. Physically, yes, physically attend the site.
Sorry, I have one more thing to say, Mr. Chair.
About the deferral?
We're basing this on hearsay. The
They,
gentleman said it was hearsay, that
Mike, Nikki, please.
sorry, what Counselor Irwin and I are saying is the report says they did not go out in person and physically look at the property. Susan and I are asking for a deferral till they physically go and look at the property. Has nothing to do with hearsay. It has to do with the report.
So
Correct,
I'll
Susan?
call the question then. All in favor of deferral? Opposed? Deferral is carried. Okay, so the next application on our agenda is B 3923 Olden, and it's for Ducharme. And we'll excuse you, Susan.
On the inside, on your side.
You don't want to stand in the dark?
You're very.
Okay, Jenny, if you can take us through this application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another application for the creation of one new lot from a larger parcel. The proposed severed parcel in this case is not the right. Is located for a property on Ducharme Road. So this is a more challenging property with what the assessment roll number is versus the PIN for the property. So I'm going to try and explain it in pictures. I tried to do it in the report. It's so on the left-hand side is in the red outline is the assessed parcel per MPAC's view. And according to them, the property includes land on both the north and south side of Ducharme Road. Based on the land registry information on the right-hand side, they use the pins. According to the PIN information, Ducharme Road in this case has its own separate PIN or property identification number. And that PIN says that the township owns the road, which they do. So it's assessed as one parcel, even though it's actually two. So it just makes it more fun for us to try and explain. So while when you look on the map, you will see this is one large parcel on both the north and south sides. In fact, it is only being addressed and considered based on the property on the south side of the road, as the township does own Ducharme Road, and therefore it is technically legally two properties, even though they're assessed tax-wise as one. So that's where we start with this one. The next here you can see is on the south side of Ducharme Road. Previously in 2021, the Committee of Adjustment approved a lot created here on that kind of wraps around the existing small lot, and that was application B6621OL. The committee did grant that provisional consent, although at this point that has not been finalized, so it kind of exists. You've said okay, but they haven't registered it with the land registry. But again, you get 2 years to complete that, so that's coming up soon. They should get that done or they'll lose it. But that's just sort of the reference as to why the severed parcel is more in the middle and why the eastern boundary of it is the angle and shape it is, because there's another potential parcel in there that we're going to butt up to. So that's sort of setting the tone for this. The original proposal that came in is shown in this solid color where I've written original proposal. And you can note that originally the lot had a sliver between it and the previously approved lot. The reason for this was there is an entrance from Ducharme Road that runs north-south from the road all the way south down around to the rear of the water body on the property. And the thought was that by leaving that, it would allow access to the retained at the rear of the property, because getting access to the retained at the rear of that water from the further up Ducharme wasn't possible, again, because then you're trying to construct driveways across existing water bodies and natural features. And unsurprisingly, the Conservation Authority doesn't like that. So There were some concerns expressed. The applicant did want to move forward with that. So this was circulated for review to Conservation Authority before any public meeting was scheduled to see if there were any concerns to be addressed. RVCA, Rio Valley Conservation Authority, did come back saying there was not possible to meet both the township setbacks, the conservation required setbacks to a wetland, and construct a driveway on the proposed lot while maintaining that existing driveway access to the rear. There were discussions with the applicant as to whether they make that a legal right of way or other such things. There was some concerns from the applicants on requirements for upgrades to roads and widths and surveying and all sorts of things. So after much discussion, the applicants opted to revise the proposal from this original solid one to the larger hatched area, which essentially tripled the lot area for the proposal, and negated the concerns from the Conservation Authority, as this lot will butt right up to the other proposed lot, with all parties agreeing that at this point, they're just going to have a handshake and say, yes, you can cross my land to get back there, and let the future do what it does. And at some point, if they would like to make that a legal right of way, they may, but right now they're going to just leave it as a everyone's okay with the way it is situation. This has the bonus of adding a significant portion of dry land outside the wetland. The original proposal did have a significant portion of it be wetlands. There was definitely a more limited building area, although septic review was done in August. So the Township of South Frontenac was actually doing the review at that point. They did review the test holes and said that they didn't have objections to the severance at that time. They had some concerns with the amount of area for building envelope and suggest the committee consider requiring that a buildable area be highlighted on the proposal or proposed lot, should it be approved in its original layout. However, once this was revised, Township of Central Frontenac had then taken over septic review and looked at the property. They did not disagree with the evaluation of where the test holes were located. They did meet the required setbacks. But however, it was also then noted that there's a large area of farmland up in proximity to Ducharme Road, where approximately where my cursor is on the screen and where that big white arrow is. So there was now more than enough area that should the other identified location not be suitable, there's more than enough area up on this other part. So the revised layout has a much greater flexibility for septic suitability. So there's no longer any concerns with that and fitting in the development. Rio Valley Conservation Authority, again, did not provide subsequent formal comments, but has indicated through emails that with this revised proposal and lot layout, they no longer have any concerns with regards to setbacks for wetlands, driveway construction, or other things that were their original concerns. I don't know what, something has gone wrong. I'm sorry, my computer's having problems and it's got the wrong pictures in here. As I noted, this is for the previous one. This is not this one. I don't, my computer's having issues these days anyway. So again, South Frontenac evaluated the original layout and noted some flexibility, but with that larger lot layout, it's no longer a concern. There was no public comments received regarding this application. So planning staff are recommending that subsequent to any comments received tonight, that the committee approve this application subject to the conditions in the planning report, which include the survey of the lot, road widening along Ducharme, as it is owned by the township, but that is very narrow and does not meet the minimum 20 meters set out in the official plan. Again, also parkland dedication, outstanding taxes, and completion of the certificate within 2 years.
Is the applicant or their agent with us tonight? No? Does the committee have any questions? Public have any questions? All right, we have a resolution moved by Duncan and seconded by Bill that application B 3923 Olden Ducharme quota for lot 2, 3, and 4, concession 10, geographic township of Olden for an 8.4 hectare, 20.7 acre parcel as a new lot be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. That the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed, and that the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued as required by the Planning Act. All in favor? Carried. Susan, you can come back. The next application we have on our agenda tonight is B 4523 Oso Kennedy. And I'm assuming Jenny, you're gonna walk us through that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am. This is the Jenny show tonight. All right, so this is another fun and unique application that required many pictures for explanations. So this is an application to not create the right of way because the right of way known as Brash Lane already exists. The committee, you may recall earlier this year, there were a couple of applications that involved this property. I will get to that in the next couple of slides. So at this point, Brash Lane is shown here in yellow, and it runs along, again, what will be the eastern edge of the property. It's an existing right-of-way that is surveyed and registered on title of both the subject property for a subject to right-of-way and in favor of a number of lots along the shoreline of the lake. I believe it is 6 in Central Frontenac and 6 in South Frontenac. One of the 6 in South Frontenac includes this lot. As the applicants owned both the subject property and the benefiting property, they never legally established the right-of-way, and now are looking at, I believe, either selling or developing the benefiting one. Again, but South Frontenac has specific rules similar to Central that you cannot do anything with a property development-wise or construction if you don't have a legal deeded access. So them allowing themselves to drive over their property to get to the other one works as long as it's not developed. For any development purposes, though, they do have to have this registered on title. There's no upgrades or changes required to this lane as part of this application. Again, as I noted, the condition of Brash Lane was evaluated during the approval process for the prior consent applications, B0923 and B1023, which you can see here on this next slide. So at the point where the committee granted approval for these, the condition of Brash Lane was evaluated, and it has not changed since then. The Public Works did a quick drive-through, but it is still in the same condition it was when the committee approved those applications earlier this year, and they did not have any further concerns. So this just highlights what was conditionally approved and what we're looking at doing here. So again, this application is just to legally add the right-of-way for this lot in South Frontenac to be allowed to drive over Brash Lane. They actually do have the right-of-way where it crosses over a couple of the smaller parcels, just not the big part in Central Frontenac because that's the one they owned. So what they're asking for is, it's not essentially just a paperwork, but it's making sure everybody has the right, no matter who owns which parcel. Planning staff recommendation is committee hear any comments from the public if there are any, and approve the application subject to surveying of the right-of-way. Again, the existing survey can be used to satisfy that. Outstanding conditions or outstanding taxes and certificate of official within 2 years.
Okay. Is this not your application either, eh? All right, so the applicant's not here. Does the committee have any questions? So it seems straightforward, but Jenny, I just want to understand why just adding a right of way to a property requires coming for consent?
According to the Planning Act, I believe it, I don't know the subsection, I was going to try and be smart and say I knew it, but it didn't. Something in the Planning Act, there is a section that states that for a right-of-way to be granted for a period of time greater than 21 years requires consent approval, and you are the delegated authority for making that approval. They can have it up to 21 years less a day. Anything longer requires it to be registered on title through consent.
Seemed very silly for something that already exists. But we do have a motion moved by Danny and seconded by Nikki that consent application B 4523 Oso Kennedy for the property located at part lot 1 and 2, concession 7, geographic township of Oso for the creation of an easement right of way over Brash Lane for access to a vacant waterfront residential lot in South Frontenac be approved subject to the conditions outlined in the planning report. That the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. And that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued, as required by the Planning Act. And just before we vote, sorry, you talked about concession 6 and the motion says 7. Is that?
That might be.
You will need to take that up with the Secretary Treasurer.
So before we do that, do we want to make sure which concession we're talking about?
Says concession 7.
Apparently that would be my error. I apologize.
Just wanted to make sure we're using the right description. So all in favor? Carried. Thank you. So now on to yours apparently. So thank you for waiting. So we're on to item 7A. It's an application for minor variance A1423 Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you noted, this is actually a combined application for permission and minor variance. Permission to expand is to apply to reconstruct and enlarge the existing dwelling and attached deck. So you can see here, in this case, the blue is the existing with the lines. The red is the new without the lines. I tried to help. I appreciate some people are colorblind, but I'm not, so I see all the colors. I don't always know when I'm not doing it so that everyone can see it, but this one has both. So in this case, the dwelling is here and the attached deck has an L shape around it. The proposal is to enlarge that footprint by adding a small portion to the rear of the dwelling and making the deck an even width around the side and front of the property. Currently, the closest point of the structure is 14.2 meters due to the orientation of the cottage and the shape of the property. Extending it straight along the face of the cottage will actually reduce the overall setback to 13.1 meters. Not much you can do on the shape. So what they're looking at is actually not a variance for that. That's part of that permission to expand because they're already a non-complying situation. So making it a little less non-complying doesn't require variance, just the permission under section 42. So the variance is to reduce the front yard back lot setback, which is another interesting situation where the bylaw has that where a property has frontage on a water body as well as a public street or private lane, that a front yard setback applies to the rear of the property because the water is considered the front yard, but that has its own 30-meter setback. And therefore the front yard setback referenced is actually the back lot one of 7 meters. So it's the front yard in the back that we're reducing the setback to. Yes, a little challenging. Anyway, it's supposed to be 7 meters and they would like it to be 6.4. The other variance is an increase in lot coverage for accessory structures. So the increase in lot coverage for the dwelling does not take it over what is permitted in the bylaw. However, the increase in square footage for the garage, given the size of the property, takes it from a 1.49% lot coverage to a 2.86% lot coverage within 60 meters of a water body. There's a maximum of a 2% lot coverage permitted. So because it complies now and won't afterwards, if approved, we need a minor variance to accommodate for that. Planning staff would like to note that it is under the overall 5%, which is the lot as a total, but only if it's outside 60 meters. The entire lot's within 60 meters. Anyway, trying to explain that. So that's where we're going with these. One of the dilemmas is moving the structure forward to maintain the rear yard setback is not possible, as between the garage and the water is their septic system. So there's just not a lot of places to go on the property that they want to expand it. And the existing garage, I can say, going from 363 square feet to 698 is still not a very large garage for most people that I have encountered. Additionally, one of the concerns with this property is that Hollywood Lane looked like on our mapping that it bisected the rear of the lot. And planning staff wanted to ensure that while the reduction in setback is to the rear front lot line, Hollywood Lane and its right of way does kind of come into the property. So that's shown here with this red triangle, although for some reason on yours, it's showing a big box where I want it to be. But it was determined that the garage would not impede the usability or functionality of Hollywood Lane and did not cross over into that registered right of way. So there was no concerns with regards to any legal access for any properties further down that use this. But the setback is to the lot line and not to the surveyed edge. In this case, the width of the surveyed area where the garage is about a ½ meter wide. So there wasn't, and the travel portion of Hollywood Lane is well outside the lot line of this property. So it's, that reduction is not going to impact anything with regards to the traveling along Hollywood Lane. This application was circulated to Mississippi Valley for review, as it is a waterfront property. Based on their review of the property and application, they determined they did not need to provide formal comments, as the development is not within 30 meters of wetland and there's no erosion hazard along the shoreline for their review. Again, that's as noted by various committee members. The province has quite limited the ability of Conservation Authority to look at natural heritage. So that's where we're trying to take that up. But yes, they have no objections and opted not to provide formal comments based on the scope of the development proposed. This property did do a performance review for the with regards to the application. Township of Central Frontenac completed this and have no objections to the application submitted. Based on the amount of expansion proposed to the dwelling, there's going to be no impact to the existing system, no upgrades required. It's within the scope of what is able to be serviced with the existing system. There were no public comments received with regards to this application. Planning staff are recommending the committee hear any comments if there are any today. Probably not. But approve the application as submitted.
Thank you, Jenny. Does the applicant have any questions or comments? The big bar. Yep.
Can I just get you to go back to the diagram with the red and blue on it for me, please? Just in, so that one of our main objectives is to preserve the physical look of the cottage. So we're trying to keep everything as close as possible, but we're not able to fit our bathroom into the floor plan with the current footprint. So the cottage actually, the square footage is correct, but the red should show that we're going 1 foot this way and 1 foot that way, just to make enough room to fit our washer in. So that should be a little stripe of red along those two sides as well for the new footprint.
I tried to put it in and it made it very hard. There just wasn't enough space in the diagram, so I made them touch. I know there's that foot, and this is more of a general, but yes, there's limitations with highlighting things in Word documents and pictures. So
No more.
yes, you are
Jenny.
correct, but the overall would be what you see.
That's fair. Thank you. Does the committee have any questions? No. All right, we have a resolution moved by Danny and seconded by Lynn that minor variance application A 1423 Carter for the property located at Part 5, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Oso for permission to extend a legal non-conforming structure and minor variance for a reduction in front yard be approved subject to the conditions outlined in the planning report. That the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant and any person or public body that made a written request to be notified and any other person or public body prescribed. And that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued, as required by the Planning Act. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for hanging in there with us. And we have no other planning business coming before us tonight? No other planning business? Something to think about, committee members, is we'll be going into a new year and we'll be looking to see if someone else wishes to chair the Committee of Adjustments. So can be. So think about it for next meeting and we'll ask again in January who wishes to chair. And I was just going to say thank you to the committee members for all the work this year. Meetings went well, and thank you to the staff. And this is our last meeting before the holidays, so everybody have a happy holiday. What about tomorrow?
For our
Planning. And Jenny doesn't care about tomorrow. So our last resolution moved by Duncan and seconded by Nikki that this meeting be adjourned until 6 p.m. January 11th, 2024, virtually and in person at the Oso Hall, 1107 Garrett Street, Charlotte Lake. All in favor? Carried.